Hello and welcome back to GP Fans on YouTube. My name is Luther. As always, I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about what was, for most of the part, an eventless Canadian Grand Prix, but then became an eventful Canadian Grand Prix, mainly with things that happened at the end of the Grand Prix. And of course, we are going to get to all of that in a second. We had the McLarens finally coming together. It's almost like Lando Norris manifested it. He spoke about it for so long. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. You heard Zach Brown saying it's inevitable. Andreas Sell, it's inevitable. You never really heard Oscar Piastri talking about it, however. Kind of staying with that cool, calm and collected persona of his. But you also had the George Russell and Max Verstappen feud continue into this Grand Prix. Absolute cinema. And I'm going to talk about how I respect and understand exactly what George Russell did, but also understand why you, Max Verstappen fans, could be quite annoyed at what the British driver was doing, because it was clearly aimed at doing one thing, and I think he semi-succeeded at it. But we're going to get onto that later in the video. We're also going to talk about Ferrari. We're going to talk about Kimi Antonelli creating history. We're going to talk about Sauber, and we're going to talk about Aston Martin, how good they look in Fernando Alonso's hands and how bad they look in Lance Stroll's broken wrist. But there is nowhere else to start other than the McLarens. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri recreating the legendary crash of Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton at the exact same spot of the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve back in 2011. Lando Norris went for a gap that wasn't there, collided with the rear of his teammate, and has made another costly error in what I've been calling, since last season, in fact, another fake title battle. But this time, it could be a real title battle if Lando Norris had the ability to not make these mistakes when it matters most. But he clearly does not. So let's get on to that crash. Lando Norris was on fresher tires to his teammate, was absolutely closing him down, and finally caught up with him. Had multiple chances to overtake his teammate while his teammate had no DRS to Andrea Kimi Antonelli, had multiple back markers to maneuver past. Lando Norris had the perfect chance to get past Oscar Piastri, but failed to do so. So then it became last chance saloon. Okay, Oscar Piastri is going to have DRS. Now he's caught up with Kimi Antonelli. What does Lando Norris do? Tries to catch him off guard. Tries to get past him down the hairpin. Do not blame him for doing that at all. Absolutely, it was a good attempt, but I feel like Oscar Piastri knew that was coming, left the door open, got the better exit out of the hairpin down the DRS straight. Both from DRS, Oscar Piastri beats him to the line. Lando Norris breaks early in order to set up a move down the start-finish straight. Now, Ayrton Senna said once that you are not a racing driver if you don't go for a gap that exists anymore. If you no longer go for a gap that exists. You can also say you're not a racing driver if you go for a gap that doesn't exist, because that is exactly what Lando Norris did. Lando Norris saw Oscar Piastri shift to the right a tiny bit, assumed that he was going to drift to the right in order to get a perfect entrance into turn one. And that's not what Oscar Piastri did. The straight, it curves a little bit. So Oscar Piastri, if he had not curved his car a little bit, would have gone onto the grass. Lando Norris goes to the left instead of all the space on the right side of his teammate, goes onto the grass, smashes into the back of his teammate, and is out of the Grand Prix. I respect Lando Norris because it took seconds for him to radio back to his team and say, look, that was all my fault. But that doesn't negate the fact that he's made such a rookie error, complete misjudgment, and just rammed into the back of his teammate. After Spain, I said I was, right here on our YouTube, I said I was disappointed at Lando Norris because he didn't even put pressure on Piastri. When Piastri had no DRS, Lando Norris wasn't able to put any pressure on him. He didn't try a move on his teammate. His teammate barely had to do anything. And then he finally puts a move on his teammate, and it ends with him getting 0 points and him being out of the Grand Prix and breaking his car. I can't be mad at him for trying something because everyone's been begging at him to try it, but if that's him attempting to do something and him finally having pressure on him to have a move done in order for him to make up points in his teammate, he was 10 points behind his teammate going into this race. If he had got that move done, he would have been 8 points behind his teammate. That's a lot of pressure for him. especially with them battling for first and second in the championship. But that pressure got to him, and now he's 22 points behind his teammate. He's nearly a race win behind his teammate. If Lando Norris was to win a Grand Prix, he would still have significant amounts of points to make up on his teammate. So that pressure clearly got to him, and I can't understand what he was going for. It seems like a mixture of him assuming Piastri was fading to the right side of the circuit and him carrying too much speed came together and caused him to ram into the back of him. And it adds to a list of errors that Lando Norris has had this season. Bear in mind, the McLarens went into this season putting pressure on themselves. Their team put pressure on themselves. Andrea Sella said, every single part of our car has some form of innovation going into it. Everyone expected the McLarens to be battling for the title this season. Lando Norris was the betting favourite to win the championship this season. The people that knew more about F1 knew that. Well, I'm not going to say that because some people that call themselves F1 experts did say Lando Norris would win the championship. But someone like me, for example, who had seen Oscar Piastri come up the ranks, knew if McLaren had a championship winning car, Oscar Piastri is going to be the one battling for a title. So with that pressure going into this season, you have the fastest car. Oscar Piastri saying we have the fastest car. Andrea Stella saying our car is innovative. Lando Norris is saying our car isn't that good. So you start off with the first race of the season. Lando Norris wins the first race of the season, but he was lucky that off, where Oscar Piastri had the off, and he also had the off, didn't cost him the win to Max Verstappen. You go into the next race, poor qualifying in China. The next race after that, poor qualifying in Japan. Well, mistakes in Japan cost him the pole position to Max Verstappen. And we saw in that race, whoever started on pole was going to win. Then you go to Bahrain, poor qualifying again, starts far back on the grid. You then go to Jeddah, crashes in qualifying, starts 10th. You then go to Miami, wins the sprint race, and then looks to be potentially the bounce back moment, but then trying to force the overtake on Max Verstappen in corner 2 in Miami, loses him places, and then eventually you see loses him the win because Oscar Piastri, biding his time, finally overtook Max Verstappen and went on to win the race. Lando Norris struggled to get past Max Verstappen, couldn't get the overtake done, had to get coached through it, eventually got it, was too far behind his teammate, finishes P2. Then you go to Imola, caught mistake in qualifying, starts further back. Then you go to Monaco, fair play, got the qualifying lap out, got pole position, wins, brings it home. It's Monaco. No one could really put pressure on him. And that car was just absolutely fantastic there. Then you go to Canada, the race that we've just been at. 2 errors in Q3, stop him from competing in pole. Then you go to the race. He crashes into the back of his teammate, destroys his suspension, and is out of the Grand Prix. And is now 22 points behind his teammate. When you look at that list of errors, and we're like just over a quarter of the way into the season, just over a third, of the way into the season. It's hard for me to say that the only reason this guy's in this title battle is because of the car. Because he's shown every now and again, he's shown so often that these qualifying errors, if he was in a worse car, he would be punished significantly more. The only reason he's able to get back on the podium in Bahrain or get back to second in Imola was a bit of luck with the safety car, but also just having the fastest car. You know, having the fastest cars allowed him to make up for these errors that he's having. And it's just not good enough. When you see Piastri being flawless, well, not flawless, but less flawed than Lando Norris. Piastri's mistakes are so far and few between. Okay, maybe he had a bit of a bad start at Canada this weekend. But after that, he did the best he could. He just brought the car home and fourth, was beginning to pressure Antonelli before the safety car. Would have been interesting to see what would happen there, but he didn't get the chance to. But the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of people get annoyed at, and I don't blame them, is the fact that Lando Norris got the 5-second penalty for causing a collision, for ramming into the back of his teammate, and got no penalty points. I think that's very, very weird, very interesting. I'm not sure. And you find it hard to kind of battle the people that are like, if that was Verstappen, what would have happened? You know, we saw Alonso get 3 penalty points last season for changing his line into a corner and then George Russell crashing behind him. And Alonso got 3 penalty points for it, for potentially erratic driving. I think it's unfair to get causing a collision penalty, a 5-second penalty, which Norris was lucky enough to have added to the end of his race due to him classifying, and it not counting towards any penalty points on his license. I think that's a very, very lucky situation to be in. But that's enough about the McLarens, because we had another chapter in the George Russell, Max Verstappen battle, or rivalry, you may call it, even though they're not necessarily battling for championships or battling for, well, this time they were battling for a win, but it was very interesting from Russell. We saw him very early on in the weekend start to talk about how Verstappen has minimal penalty points to work with. George Russell said he has a lot more penalty points to be working with when they qualified on the front row together. Max Verstappen was asked about it, and let's say that he was less than pleased about any talk about his penalty points throughout the weekend and him being just 1 penalty point away from a race ban. But I see a lot of Verstappen fans talking. I've seen a lot of Verstappens talk to me about how annoyed they were with George Russell, calling him dirty for his move during the safety car, stamping on the brakes to see if he could get Verstappen a penalty for overtaking under the safety car, and all those comments throughout the weekend about Verstappen being just 1 penalty point away from a race ban. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I am a Verstappen lover as much as anybody. I'm not a Verstappen fan, but I really appreciate his ability and appreciate watching him race. But I cannot be mad at George Russell for doing what George Russell did. I think the best Formula One drivers are some of the most ruthless human beings you will meet. It's that simple. They will find a weakness in you and they will exploit it however they deem fit. And that is what George Russell did this weekend. And I'm not saying Verstappen is weak, and I'm not saying Verstappen has a weakness, but an easy way to exploit Verstappen is to take advantage of the fact that if he gets any single penalty, whether that is impeding in qualifying, whether that is a safety car infringement, whether that is ignoring yellow flags, anything, he is going to be banned for the next race. And George Russell knew that. So what did he do? He tried to get in his head before the race. He tried to get in his head after qualifying. He tried to get in his head in the pre-weekend media day interviews to see if Max Verstappen would do anything erratic on the track. Max Verstappen did not, to his credit, and I respect it, because Verstappen is a much mature driver than he was before. So with the safety car the race ending on a safety car, George Russell had one more stab at it. And he slammed on the brakes to see if he could get Verstappen a penalty. And he tried it, and it didn't work, unfortunately for George Russell. But I can see why people would be annoyed at him doing that, because it isn't sportsmanlike. But I would like to say, do you guys remember last season, the end of last season? Max Verstappen knew when he was leading the championship that a DNF to him was nothing. A DNF to Lando Norris was everything. Lando Norris had to finish every single race. Not just that, he had to beat Verstappen in every single race. So Max Verstappen drove like a man, an uncontrollable man, when he was next to Lando Norris. He was willing to risk DNFs because he knew DNFs meant more to Lando Norris than they did to him. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. So when it comes to these things, where it's very Schumacher-esque, you've got to find a weakness in your opponent, and you've got to exploit it. And the best do it. So I can't be mad at George Russell for doing it. In terms of the race, great qualifying lap by George Russell, and then good start, great start, reaction time, better than Verstappen, held himself into corner 1 and corner 2, and just cruised to victory. A very, very, very mature race by George Russell. It was very clear that whoever qualified first was going to win the race unless they made mistakes, and George Russell made no mistakes. So I got to give him credit for that. His teammate, Kimi Antonelli, became the 3rd youngest podium sitter in Formula One history. and he was the third driver in F1 history to get a podium as a teenager. Kimi Antonelli, last time I was here, we spoke about how I was scared that his run of three races without points would affect him, and it didn't. It didn't. He had a great qualifying lap, a solid qualifying lap, sorry, a great start to the race to get past Piastri. And once Piastri was behind him, he managed the gap, managed his tires, managed the pace perfectly. And him coming home in third and Mercedes securing a 1-3 is the third best result of Mercedes during the ground effect era. So class to him. We know we have a star in the making in Andrea Kimi Antonelli. It's just great to see him bounce back from what was a hard run of races and secure his first podium in Formula One. In Ferrari, a lot of people are talking about Ferrari's strategy decisions, which seems to be everyone's favorite topic when it comes to Ferrari after every race, good or bad. I think it's a bit overrated though. I think it's a bit over-exaggerated due to Leclerc seeing a bit of change in his tone, over the last couple of races, Spain and now this, where he seems a lot more open in disputing the team's strategy calls, which I'm not mad at because I think Leclerc is my favorite driver. He's my second favorite driver of all time behind Michael Schumacher. So I can say for a fact, I think that was one thing that he did lack. And you saw it a lot with him and Sainz, where Sainz was more open to talking to the team about how can we change the strategy? How can I'm in the car. I know what's happening. I know the race more than anybody from the cockpit. Maybe you don't have all the data that the team do, but you know how you feel in your car, how you feel on those tires, and you can help kind of mold a strategy from that point of view. Leclerc kind of lacked that, but the last few races we've seen him do it. We saw it in Monza last season, and that's how he got the win. So he wanted to do the one stop, and the team did not want him to do the one stop. They wanted him to do the two stop. And I think whilst it would have been interesting when you're starting 7th or 8th, whichever one Leclerc was starting. I think it was 7th, Norris 8th. I can't actually remember fully. Alonso 7th. Yeah, so it was probably Alonso 6th, so it probably was 7th, sorry. You can try whatever you want. That's the point I was going to get to. You can try and do a couple of risky strategy calls because you don't have much to lose. So when Ferrari kind of declined his offer of trying the one stop, I thought it was a bit unfair because with Lewis Hamilton's damage to the floor, the worst thing that would have happened to Leclerc was he finishes where he ended up finished 5th. Like, that was going to be the worst possible thing that could happen. And the best possible thing that could have happened is he's ahead of the people that are ahead of him and the safety car is called and he finishes ahead of them. So I think it was a missed opportunity, but was it as bad as people are crying out? Nah, I don't. I think the biggest issue was for Hamilton staying out maybe a bit longer than they needed to, him falling into traffic and kind of ruining his race from there. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton was very, very, very unfortunate with the damage to his floor. He ran over an animal, a groundhog, I believe, and it punched a hole in the floor of his car, lost 20 points of downforce. And from that point onwards, he had no pace. I think it's likely he would have finished behind Leclerc. Leclerc was quicker than him all weekend. I know Leclerc qualified behind him, but that was because of a mistake in qualifying. So I think it was a bit unfortunate for him, but I do think he probably got it was just a matter of before the safety car would he have been closer to everybody? Maybe. And I think it proved to be quite difficult to overtake people at the front of the grid anyway. So I'm not sure if more pace would have meant he was going to be able to overtake people anyway. But the main thing during Ferrari during this weekend, and as your resident Ferrari fan at GPFans, I think it's fair for me to talk about the rumours that Fred Vasseur is under pressure. Now, as a man who didn't want Mattia Binotto out due to Ferrari chopping and changing team principles too often, it's a similar situation I find myself in. Ferrari have a lot of issues. Ferrari have had a lot of issues. We haven't won any championship since I was 8 years old. Haven't won a driver's championship since I was 7 years old. I think changing team principles is not going to do that again. I think under Fred Vasseur, Ferrari have seen improvements. Under Fred Vasseur, Ferrari have seen their drivers improve, they've seen their workflow improve, and one bad start to a season is not enough to be like, okay, we need to change again. If Fred Vasseur is removed from Ferrari, it is more proof that the seniors in Ferrari, John Elkann, etc., are the problem. Ferrari are way too quick to pull the trigger on team principles. And if you look around the grid at the successful teams, Mercedes, Red Bull, there is an element of, and those two are the most successful teams. If you look back from 2009 onwards, Ross Brawn to Toto Wolff, Christian Horner has been there since Red Bull became Red Bull, since they bought out Jaguar. Continuity is key. Allow the man to build a team around him. Do not just switch up on him because of one poor start to a season. You know, this is meant to be a project. This isn't meant to be a thing. People, Ferrari, the seniors in Ferrari, in the Italian media, think it's that easy to flick a switch. McLaren did not flick a switch. If you think McLaren flicked a switch and were great overnight, you are completely ignorant to the development that they brought over time. And Ferrari can't expect that. You can't microwave success in Formula One. You can't. That's not how it works. You know? Not everyone's a Brawn, and Brawn just found a loophole in that specific set of regulations and masterminded it. You know what I mean? Not everybody's going to have that. Mercedes with their engine manufacturing, that was a process of Ross Brawn and Michael Schumacher over those years before Lewis Hamilton bringing the right staff into Mercedes to be able to develop that team into what it was. James Vowles, you know, forgotten his name, the team principal of Sauber right now, another person that they brought into Mercedes to help them. You know, it's hard to win in Formula One. And Fred Vasseur knows that. Fred Vasseur made a great point. He said, and I quote, we changed team principles, we've changed the drivers, we've changed almost everything except for one thing. He never said what that one thing was, but I'm pretty sure it's obvious. It's the seniors. It's John Elkann, the CEO of Ferrari. You know, it's these people that have not changed. These people. John Elkann is the one that wanted to bring Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari. Of course. It's a corporate move. You know, Ferrari is so similar to Manchester United in ways that they're run like a business, not like a sports team. And that causes so many errors. And that causes so many decisions to be made wrong. And if they get rid of Fred Vasseur, it's going to be another situation where they're just making a decision based on things that, based on not taking into account the situation well, based on not knowing situational well, based on the Ferrari company being involved in the Ferrari Formula One team's decision-making once again too much. And it's something that we've seen over time way too much. There's also rumors surrounding Charles Leclerc, rumors that I don't even want to get into, to be honest with you, because I think it's ridiculous. I think Charles Leclerc is so obviously in love with Ferrari and has been forever. And these are rumors that come up every single year. I heard Simon on Formula One, on Sky Sports F1, talk about these being the first rumors of such. That's not true at all. These rumors, as a Leclerc fan, I'm not a Leclerc fan, I'm a Ferrari fan, but as a guy that loves Charles Leclerc, like, these rumors come up every year. Trust me, every year. And every year he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then signs a contract. And it shuts up the rumors. Leclerc has a long-term contract. It's not going to happen. He's not going anywhere. But then quickly, because I've been talking for a very long time, let's get on to Aston Martin. It looks like these upgrades that they've brought have brought them back to the top of the midfield, but it's at least in Alonso's hands. Back-to-back points position finishes for Fernando Alonso after he went 8 races and 2 sprint races without securing a single point. He looked quick. He looked quick in qualifying and quick enough in the race to secure the points. Shout out Fernando. I hated the fact that he was unfortunate to get no points in Monaco and unfortunate to get no points in Imola as well. So I'm happy for him to get back-to-back points finishes. But however, in Lance Stroll's hands, it looks like the car is still not good because Lance Stroll is still not good. He struggled. He crashed in practice, was out in Q1, and finished last of those who finished the race while being a lap down. Lance Stroll continues to have the fakest seat in Formula One. And like I said before, people who link Max Verstappen with a move to Aston Martin, I hope for Max Verstappen's sake, but he doesn't go to them, because I can't take Aston Martin serious as a serious contender until they do not have that person driving that car. Lance Stroll is not a good Formula One driver. Lance Stroll does not have the ability, and you can see it when he's put up against Alonso. In races that they've both finished, I'm not sure if Lance Stroll's finished ahead of Alonso this season so far. In races they've both finished, because Lance Stroll obviously had the points finish in the season opener in Australia while Fernando Alonso crashed out. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And when you got someone like Felipe Drugovich, who was a great F2 driver, won the F2 championship in 2022, you've got to feel bad for him when he sat behind the most fugazi F1 seat in history. They act like Lance Stroll has earned that seat. He hasn't. He hasn't earned it. He's not been performing for a very long time, and he's going to have that seat as long as his father owns the team, which is ridiculous to me. So I just think that for me is very hard to take seriously, especially if Aston Martin have hopes of challenging in 2026 with Adrian Newey's influence in the car. It's just unfortunate. But quickly, just to end off, I just want to go shout out Hülkenberg, back-to-back points finishes. The upgrades that they brought to the car look to be performing absolutely fantastically. And you can see it because despite Bortoleto still not having any points, we've seen increased and bettered results from him P12 and P14 after being a back marker for most of the season. I hope it improves him because, like I said, Gabriel Bortoleto is a very good rookie. And maybe the performances aren't showing it, but he's a talented driver and a promising driver. And unfortunately, for most of the season, that car's not been allowing him to show just how good he is. So hopefully he starts performing the way Nico Hülkenberg has, because Hülkenberg, we all know, is a brilliant driver. Hülkenberg, keep going at it. Bortoleto, it will soon come. And I'm just, fair play to Sauber. We know they're turning to Audi next season, and a team as big as Audi cannot be performing at the back of the grid. They need to be at least a midfield team. Audi are too big a car manufacturer to be performing the way Sauber have been performing lately, or last season and the start of this season. But it's been me. It's been Luther, as always. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts on the Lando Norris crash. Comment your thoughts on the Max Verstappen, George Russell beef. Do we think that will continue? And do you think that in Silverstone, once Max Verstappen's penalty points are wiped away, will he get some revenge on George Russell with his fresh license? And what do you think? Could Charles Leclerc leave Ferrari? Could Fred Vasseur be fired for Ferrari, or could they see him just not get a contract extension? Because I do believe his contract might be up at the end of this season. Let me know that and more, and we will see you next week ahead of the Red Bull Ring, ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix. It's been a pleasure. See you next time. Peace.